If the election were held today, Hillary Clinton would win in a landslide. Donald Trump, he's down often by double digits in every single battleground state except sometimes for Florida, depending on the poll. And Clinton has him on the defensive in Georgia and in Arizona, too. And Trump is polling significantly worse in every single state Obama won in 2012. Every one of them. But the election won't be held today, so Trump still has 12 weeks to turn this thing around. I'm Steve Green with Scott Ott and Bill Whittle, and this is the right angle on how to patch the leak on the good ship Trump and get that motor back up to speed. Now, I don't mean to put all the blame on this for Trump. Since 1992, the Democrats have taken New Hampshire, Colorado, Virginia, North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, and California and turned them all blue, or at least purple. Now, all Republicans have to show for their efforts is flipping tiny little West Virginia red. That said, Trump is polling worse than Mitt Romney or John McCain at this point in the election cycle. In fact, no one with Trump's August numbers has ever gone on to win the White House in modern times since we invented this little polling thing. Scott, Trump was supposed to change the electoral map, opening up a new path to victory in the Rust Belt states and the upper Midwest. Instead, it looks like he's opened up a new path for Clinton in Georgia and in Arizona and maybe even Mississippi. We're still waiting to see if she staffs up there like she has been in Georgia. And Hillary's super PAC reported this morning that it's not even going to bother running TV ads in Virginia, Colorado, or Pennsylvania any later than mid-September. In fact, they've already stopped running those ads in Virginia. Scott, can things really be this bad already?
You know, Jonah Goldberg, the great writer, posted something to Twitter the other day where he's basically saying, for the people who are attacking Never Trumpers, explain to me how it is the Never Trumpers' fault that Donald Trump hasn't mounted any advertising campaign or opened offices in any states. Now, I don't know that he's opened no offices, but clearly he still believes, and apparently his campaign manager believes, that they can continue to run the kind of campaign they did in the primaries, and it'll be successful in the general. Recently, as we speak now, I think a couple of days ago, Breitbart released a survey, which they did because they felt like the mainstream media was slanting everything toward Hillary Clinton. Breitbart did its own survey along with, I think, Gravis or somebody.
Yeah, it was Gravis.
And they came out with Donald Trump with a 4-point deficit or more. There's one part of me that says, I am so sick to death of polling. I mean, what, we got 80-some days until the election, and we're going to, every time I hear the phrase, if the election were held today, I go, oh, please, Lord Jesus, if only the election were held today so that this could just be over with. On the other hand, I remember at least one gentleman, perhaps up to three, who kept thinking to themselves before the last election that these polls were going to be wrong and really they weren't reflecting the true groundswell of support that was going to come out for Mitt Romney. I think the sad thing in all of this is not so much who's supporting Trump or who's supporting Hillary. The sad thing is that we have so many states where the message of liberty should ring like a clarion call of beauty and joy, and somehow the Republican Party, and I blame myself, has managed to kill it.
Well, Scott, don't you worry. We're going to get to that in my members segment later this week about keep on ringing that Liberty bell. But before that, I should add that I'm not basing my observations on some single lousy national poll of registered voters or American adults or anything like that. I've spent the last 6 weeks going state by state, looking only at polls of likely voters, digging into the crosstabs, and I have to tell you, Trump is down almost 40 points with young voters. He's hemorrhaging support with women. He's doing worse with blacks and Latinos than even Romney did, and he's losing college-educated whites, which is a group the GOP has won in every single election going all the way back to 1952. And to top things off, I know people like to say Romney and McCain were Republicans in name only, but they still scored better with actual Republican voters than Trump does. So, Bill, I want you to pretend that Trump has just said, "You're fired," to Paul Manafort, his campaign manager, and then tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Bill, you've got 12 weeks. Tell us how you turn this thing around."
I have a friend who wrote an episode of Cheers. His name was Fief Sutton, and he got to be executive producer of Cheers, and I did a number of spec scripts for Cheers, and the one I saw that he did that was actually shot, none of mine were shot, was called How to Make Friends and Electrocute People. And it had to do with Cliff Clavin, who, as you know, is a problem with his personality. Cliff the Postman was always shooting his mouth off and got to be quite unpopular. And in that particular episode, the way they decided to make Cliff more popular was they put an electro shock underneath his neck, and anytime he said something obnoxious, they'd hit it from across the board, and he would just get the shock and he'd change tacks. So that'd be my first choice. Needless to say, if Hillary Clinton were running unopposed, she'd lose in a landslide. The problem is not, Steve, the problem is not that there isn't advice that could save Trump, although it's getting very late. The problem is he won't take it. It's part of his. It's not just his character; it's his actual constitution. He's just made that way. He has been very successful in the same way that P.T. Barnum has been successful, but P.T. Barnum wasn't running for president. P.T. Barnum was running for showman of the world and the century, and that's what he was. Needless to say, I would like him to speak less, and you could almost say it's time to put him on a teleprompter. But look, I don't think any of these things are going to change the guy. The guy's, he shoots from the hip. That's who he is. That he's always been that way. Even if you had the electric shock, he won't change. Now, the only thing in here, well, there's two things in here that I think are going to change this, could conceivably change this appalling electoral situation we're in now. One of them is Hillary Clinton going to be alive in November? Now, before all of you lunatics out there talk about my hateful rhetoric, like I'm going to mobilize my army of Stratolungers to go out and make sure she doesn't make it. No, she's a very sick woman, and she seems to get sicker every day. She's taking 3 days off for every day she's on the campaign trail. The press is finally on this and starting to look at it a little bit. And frankly, the second thing that I think might conceivably turn this around is the debates. Sure. I mean, Donald Trump has, every time he opens his mouth, he loses votes. And every time Clinton opens her mouth, she loses votes. And Clinton has had the good sense to not say anything for about a year now, almost a year, since she's had an actual press conference. I still think that there is a possibility that Donald Trump in the debates could simply eviscerate her, could just simply leave her in either no answer mode or worse for her in kind of balloon drop mode, which we talked about last week. I think that's really about it. I think it's about the only hope we have left. Let me just finally say, I would like just once before I die to have an election where I was actually genuinely like on fire for my candidate, and not just urging people to take one on the chin and lesser of two evils and all that other stuff. I was old enough to vote for Ronald Reagan. I just wasn't smart enough to, and it must have been nice, and I think it would be nice again someday. And look, if this thing goes as south as it looks like it's going to go now, we'll be left with one thing and one thing only, and that's we the people. We will be left with the people of the country to find a way to survive another 4 years of this larceny and treason and destruction of our values, accelerated by the most corrupt person who's ever run for office, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that's saying too much about it. Folks, this is not rocket surgery. This is real simple stuff. Donald Trump has got to campaign. And I don't mean just hold rallies, which rally the faithful. That's all they do. I mean, he has to run a professional, traditional campaign starting right now. Because what worked in the GOP primary is turning into a total disaster in the general election, just like a lot of us warned you it would. But what it means Trump has to go to state fairs. It means going to local businesses. It means all the glad-handing stuff that Trump has eschewed so far. It means buying TV ads. It means putting together a ground game and a digital get-out-the-vote effort. It means spending money on analytics and polls and all the rest of the stuff that Hillary Clinton has been preparing for literally for the last 12 years. Now, Trump has the money to do all this. According to FEC filings, he raised $80 million in July and spent $63 million. The problem is nobody seems to know what he spent the $63 million on. So he's got to get his act together and run a professional campaign, or this thing, I'm sorry to tell you, is already over. And that is the right angle on writing the Trump campaign. The show, it's made possible by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. Without them, we wouldn't be here, so our thanks to them. And our thanks to you for watching. We'll see you next time.